It's safe to say that whether it was deserved or not, Hiruzen was revered as the strongest Hokage to ever live, with statements hailing him as once a god of shinobi, capable of wielding every single jutsu in Konoha with Sannin level power at nearly 70 years of age. Although it's really safe in assuming that Hiruzen only towered so high because he was standing upon the shoulders of a man who came before him, his mentor, Tobirama Senju, who was praised as the fastest shinobi of his generation, a man capable of inventing jutsu that could transcend literal concepts of space and distance. Tobirama didn't just shape the shinobi world, he fundamentally rewrote the limitations of what it could be, how powerful people could be. So if these two were to fight, who would actually win, all things considered? So, well, let's find out. Shooting for 20k, let's go. Opening up under the initial preface, I will be assuming Hiruzen to be in a younger state, and it's not only more fair to his actual power, but I'm admittedly fine with the assumption that he keeps his physical stats from his older forms, so perhaps consider this to not be a prime Hiruzen when he was training the Sannin, or an elder one, but rather like a Nine-Tails attack Hiruzen, facing off against a prime Tobirama. Although, let's first go through Hiruzen, who is actually implied by Minato to be capable of holding off the full and complete enraged Nine-Tails, to which he does, pushing it out of the village, despite a later curtailed Nine-Tails being beyond Itachi, who even notes that if they faced off, they would end up killing each other, and even if more Akatsuki level backup were to assist him, it wouldn't change the outcome. And while many people will attribute this diction to Jiraiya, we both know that Itachi and his partner Kisame are discussing Naruto and refer to Jiraiya as a separate subject from who Itachi previously just described. And mind you, this Itachi should, in his raw output, scale 2 or above his Edo form, which could completely parry off KCM1 Naruto and matching his near Blitz level enhanced chakra arms with his own Susanoo hands, with this weaker Nine-Tails being a threat that nobody on the planet, according to Data Book 3, could ever subdue, with his power being capable of potentially destroying the planet at large. However, what more would you expect from the professor himself, who after all was trained by the aforementioned Lord Second, who created those jutsu transcending the concepts of space and distance? But let's go ahead and stop here in the embellishment of reaching for the top shelf per se, and let's actually dial it back to just how strong old Hiruzen truly is in context, and then you'll really understand how powerful he and Tobirama are in comparison. Having trained rigorously under both the first Hokage and Tobirama, the young Hiruzen, considered a genius, is not only recognized as the most accomplished of Tobirama's elite escort unit, but also possesses talent and or skill surpassing Tobirama's even from childhood, likely several years before this, although he would later go on to grow so much that the thought of him ever even being hurt as a child became unfathomable. Fitting with how many other Kage around this time, and the contextual thereafter, such as the third Kazekage, surpassed the more diplomatic-focused second Kazekage in Shimon, with the same being true for the third Raikage in comparison to the second, demonstrating a narrative of the second generation allowing the third to be a monstrous force of ability. Where Hiruzen would go on to beat Danzo for the title of third Hokage according to the Sakura novel, despite him being likely the second greatest of Tobirama's once dominant squad, where the third would then go on to be considered by nearly everyone around him to be reputed as the strongest Hokage to ever live, supporting the natural surpassing of each generation, and Hiruzen surpassing Tobirama, who at one point used to be hailed as the fastest shinobi according to Madara. However, with Tobirama's speed only eclipsing Hashirama's through his space-transcending flying Raijin, and Hiruzen's strength only being in reputation, both men still sit below Hashirama due to just rudimentary applied skepticism, with Hashirama being called the strongest shinobi in Data Book 4, excluding any time clause for why this wouldn't include either Tobirama or Hiruzen. So they are both under Hashirama, yet incredibly powerful. However, with Tobirama's speed being more palpably close to Hashirama's level, it truly does speak to his ability, which not only Madara compliments, but the second data book as well, via noting that, quote, he is prideful of his superior combat ability, and with the water release jutsu, which he was especially skillful, was unexpectedly revived in the present to defeat the third, which put fear into the hearts of Konoha. directly implying that even though Tobirama did boast the fastest speed of any shinobi during his time, he also took pride in something else, something greater, his water style that is stated to have flooded battlefields, drowning enemy platoons with literal tsunamis, according to a 10th anniversary guide for the anime, which also makes many remarks about his legendary water lance that's so strong that surely nothing can't be cut. And this guide technically only covers to around the Akatsuki suppression arc, so, Itachi Susano is excluded, but wood style and other elite jutsu like anime exclusive flaming Rasengans are still up for grabs, if you could believe it. Yet, despite this monstrous level being literally greater, something literally greater than even his speed, it was revived completely when brought back by Orochimaru and was so strong it struck fear into the hearts of Konoha, and as like with his fist of steel, he holds nothing back. And understanding what Orochimaru dreamed to do to shed his skin of mortality, he spent more than 10 years honing the Edo Tensei according to Data Book 2, so that when the curtains open, the stage is set for the life and death match with the third Hokage, upon which all of his dreams rested. So we can at least be certain in this jutsu being much greater than when Tobirama once utilized it, although in complimenting his own, Kabuto seems to imply that the Edos under Orochimaru were still, quote, completely held back, as opposed to what the anime remarks. Furthermore, we will come back to their level, but most people don't fully commentate on Hiruzen's mental afflictions, as Databook 1 states, quote, he cannot suppress his sorrow and regret for failing to guide his former student down the right path. On top of that, he blames his own leniency for allowing the worst case scenario to unfold, which adds admittedly 2 levels of suppression to his mental state, which was so much that, quote, words once used to describe the third Hokage, strongest of all generations, genius, are full of praise, and yet despite possessing mastery of every jutsu in the leaf and earning the nickname the Professor, it is a bitter irony that he was not blessed with a student suitable to inherit that vast knowledge or skill, which is a remark for you to jot down in your mental notes for later. Now, with the groundwork set, this leads me into multiple subpoints that are really interesting in deciding multiple key different factors for their interaction. Now, although he was respected by all the villagers as the third Hokage, they also adored him as the Professor, which is stated in Databook 1's glossary to be, quote, the title of the third Hokage who mastered every jutsu in the village and was called a god of shinobi, with both Databook 1 and 2 noting his specialty to be his ability to use all forms of jutsu. Even anime guides remark that, quote, the Professor, a title used to praise the third Hokage who is said to know and wield all techniques in the Hidden Leaf Village, meaning that for the merit of our discussion here, his lost student's words about what Hiruzen knew or didn't know is fleshed out much more in all of these meetings, with the aforementioned guys stating that, quote, all of the village jutsu are known by the evil one who unravels them, implying that in trying to be like his dear sensei, as opposed to his favorite Hokage Tobirama, he too unraveled every jutsu in Konoha, which his birthday column furthers by stating, quote, Orochimaru is taught by the third Hokage, Hiruzen, who is revered as the Professor for his vast knowledge of all existing Konoha jutsu. All of this makes the case for his usage of every jutsu, as opposed to just his knowledge of every jutsu, quite consistent, with Ebisu in the manga stating that he has thousands of genjutsu alone, hence why he would counter Hashirama's Bringer of Darkness, fighting off both of these Hokage level opponents using just his taijutsu, guided by the sense of smell. I mean, think about this. He's fighting off characters who individually can solo the 5 Kage, and he's fighting 3 of these while only using his sense of smell. Furthermore, the more you investigate the what does Hiruzen actually know question, the more you realize just how crazy it gets, like how Orochimaru stated that Hiruzen knew and could manipulate Naruto's tetragram seal, being one of the very few in the entire world capable of doing so, with that seal in particular scaling above Killer Beast's Steel Shell seal. And to make this more interesting, Minato is known to have been training profusely with Kushina, learning who Uzumaki sealing ninjutsu, wherein on the off day that he didn't show up, she told him, well, he hadn't learned every Uzumaki sealing ninjutsu quite yet. This implies that not only the assumption on Minato's part that he had, and the presumption that she knows all of them is quite likely. Both are in the village during Hiruzen's reign, so you can kind of see where this is going. Hiruzen's jutsu in particular are shown in this very fight as monstrous as well, such as the Dragon Flame Bombs being said by the third anime profile guides to be the strongest fire style on the planet, with other anime guides hailing Itachi's to be beyond ordinary fire style, as to why it could burn his younger brother's curse mark wing even more than Deidara's C2 Bijou nuking ability. And on top of that, the Databook 2 hails this as one boasting exceptionally high destructive power even in comparison to his other jutsu, which would namely be jutsu like his Adamantine Noi, which could cut through even the wood style, arguably the highest praised jutsu in Databook 2, with the only contender being Minato's Flying Raijin, which is stated to cross the boundaries of time and space in this very databook. However, in the face of Tobirama's resurrected full power water style, which he could use without a nearby water source, quote, a testament to his remarkable mastery of ninjutsu, says Databook 4, concerning his one sign water wall. These unbelievable flame bombs would likely be countered due to the elemental type, but to further complement Hiruzen's diversity, he can actually halt a more aggressively offensive water style in the dragon, using just his basic mud wall, with the anime and its liberties showing Hiruzen completely evading Tobirama's largest water style in this sequence, being his water style water shockwave, also attesting to his water style ability, which is stated in the aforementioned anime guide to be, quote, streams of water gathered into a tornado and made to explode at full velocity. The impact is similar to a huge tsunami. Kind of crazy when you really think of it. So no wonder the bystanding elite Anbu members remark that this sort of contest is what it takes to be Hokage, something Fanbook 1 says is to be at the pinnacle of the world. Furthermore, with the Sarutobi clan being a clan known for their extraordinary fire style, a largely ninjutsu-focused fight would probably emerge, although as we saw, even if the water style can halt the fire style, he has multiple other styles to advantageously pull from, and likely even has counters to things like his aforementioned Adamantine Noi, which is called indestructible, alluding to perhaps the ultimate offense versus the ultimate defense, although considering some jutsu are even of a higher tier than that, it seems to be that in the realm of ninjutsu, Hiruzen has the obvious advantage, as we've highlighted for both genjutsu and even sealing ninjutsu, but perhaps summoning jutsu as well, as we know Enma is not only just called the strongest animal summon in Fanbook 1, but is also said by Databook 2 to be a fighter who once served as Hiruzen's right hand on countless battlefields. His hidden combat power and extensive battle record are second to none, meaning that all in all, a battle of ninjutsu is not one of favor for Tobirama, and a more physically imposing approach is much better, strategically speaking. I mean, thus far, we've showed that even Hiruzen's more rudimentary jutsu, whilst doubly suppressed in namely his mental state but his age as well, is above Tobirama's most renowned abilities. We also know that he should recognize this more physically imposing approach pretty handily, as he was leading a team to take down the strongest being possibly ever in the known world, one of said members being Minato, who trained the same Kakashi who sort of scoffed at Shikamaru having 200 IQ as a child. And on the topic of intellect, this is also kind of nuanced, so let's settle that through intertwining it into some common arguments for Tobirama and his Madara level speed, which I think is actually pretty simple conversation whenever you break everything down and put it in context. In a world of two gods of shinobi who could peerlessly tower over everyone around them using their life-giving wood style and ability to regenerate limbs and organs casually, or their mountain-towering monster capable of rivaling every bijou on the planet, one man is stated by even Madara himself to have boasted the fastest speed of any shinobi, despite those aforementioned characters having abilities that can elevate their speed to an entirely different level, beyond where Hashirama, for example, in base, with a more suppressed body than his brother, can equal Tobirama's speed and taijutsu. So what is Madara talking about when he says that? Well, it is actually pretty clear. Just as A, for example, is still said to be the fastest man alive despite being nearly killed by Sasuke, we know this is directly due to his body flicker being the fastest in the world. You see, when Naruto characters are contextually discussing speed, or anything really, they refer to the absolute highest possible end and attribute it as descriptive for that character. So, Tobirama, in having a speed-based technique said to be incomparable to body flicker in Databook 2, is thus the fastest man alive on the basis of the Flying Raijin. and likely even when Madara and Hashirama are around. So more understandably, his combat speed is lower but still extremely impressive, and that's where both his and Hiruzen's Jubito fight feats come in, giving us pretty good insight into their raw combat speed, comparatively speaking, that is. After arduously battling throughout the Fourth War, we can see that having reunited with his sensei, Orochimaru is actually open to engaging in some master-student nostalgia, remembering their times during the previous Second and possibly Third War. Hiruzen, despite having the same amount of developmental wrinkles from his final fight, can utilize the adamantine Noi to outspeed even Orochimaru's bodily snakes, which are orders of magnitude beyond regular ones and are typically faster than the user, whether it be in Orochimaru or Sasuke case, like when Orochimaru uses it to keep up with Four Tails Naruto, or when Sasuke restrains Jugo and Suigetsu. However, what's really keen to jot down is that Orochimaru also has a completely new Zetsu body with Hashirama's DNA infused into that, where even their DNA profiles are so similar that Sakura implies it wouldn't be an overstatement to call them literal genetic clones of Hashirama, and thus, if you desire a comparison for how much stronger War Arc Orochimaru would be, as opposed to the Part 1 variation, which is actually kind of important, then you could compare him to the Edo Tensei Hokage, and how all of their host bodies are weaker than Chunin Exam Sasuke, yet Hiruzen can still combo attack with this Orochimaru, showing how without his mental afflictions, him completely blitzing around Orochimaru and knocking the Kusanagi sword out of his hands whilst deathly fatigued is a low ball. And so the physicality for the Hiruzen that we were talking about here is not only that entire Zetsu body difference, but also 10 years younger, which was noted to be something that would have put him basically in a class above his older level, a class above Orochimaru. And while Hiruzen being above Tobirama in regard to speed seems, in all honesty, pretty absurd to most people, the only real reason would be, well, his performance against Jubito, while neglecting Hiruzen's true power. We know that he can react to an unstable and fluctuating power, Jubito running at him, where he can then, at the bare minimum, place a flying rising seal via an arm movement, something calced to a very low end relative, which Hiruzen can actually completely replicate via moving his whole shoulder out the way, except in Hiruzen's case, it's much more impressive. Jubito is not only moving in a more offensive form, being flight as stated, but also the TSOs are extending, therefore adding another layer of acceleration to his overall speed, and that which Hiruzen is actually reacting to, as opposed to Tobirama, whose instance they were just stagnant. Meaning that if you could believe it, Hiruzen reacted to a much faster attack, plus was capable of completely analyzing the TSOs and their negating properties, understanding them to be akin to Tsuchikage Oniki's particle style. Thus, the only thing to posit here, if you don't care to claim old Hiruzen and Tobirama are relative, then you kind of have to just play Scorched Earth and simply attest that every single feat on Jubito, whilst unstable, can't be scalable because his power is simply fluctuating. But some will take it further and argue, well, that's kind of fine because Tobirama is still a combatant capable of remaining relevant against a Jubito level threat, but the same would kind of just be said about Hiruzen, as the idea in and of itself is quite ambiguous, which could be displayed through how Hiruzen not only had the feat prior, which could still be greater, but he also analyzed not only the TSOs but the God Tree roots as well later. Furthermore, while we did note that Tobirama did uncover the Senjutsu counter, that still doesn't do much contextually speaking. Hiruzen can save Naruto and inform the rest of the squad what Tobirama is about to do, and while sure, Tobirama looks more impressive, he's also around for the entire fight and has elite mastery over the Flying Rising, probably the most helpful jutsu in this entire fight, which Hiruzen likely doesn't have that level mastery over. Plus, the Flying Rising was also only done by means of merely an arm movement, which we've established that Hiruzen, had he been proficient at the Flying Rising, could have done the same thing, physically speaking. Meaning that all in all here, we know that the two are probably relative in terms of their physical stats, with Tobirama's water style outshining anything that's particular to Hiruzen, who makes up for that and having a way more diverse set of jutsu, and among them, the ones that do counter the water style. Plus, summoning and sealing ninjutsu can also kind of force the fight to go wherever, and he could probably have an advantage if it goes in those more nuanced and awkward areas. The two are quite relative in terms of their raw intellect, at least in combat, and while many will point to Tobirama's development as the village, including its police force and academy, the latter of the which, for example, isn't much of a Tobirama achievement, but rather a Hiruzen achievement, as we know that Fanbook 1 remarks that Tobirama created a very primitive system to keep a consistent flux of powerful soldiers, where Hiruzen later used his genius to transform it into what we know today. Over the course of about 30 years, all things considered, with the second anime profile guide stating that, quote, the third Hokage put special effort into raising educators for the academy, once again showing that genius. Perhaps what's commonly omitted about Tobirama is that in his glory days, Lord Second was once a Kenjutsu master overflowing with talent, as was Madara's younger brother and his rival Izuna, as noted in Data Book 4 and his file, which commentates on Tobirama 2 and stating that he was focused on developing Konoha with his brother. He also devoted his energy to training the third Hokage. Furthermore, in Data Book 4, elsewhere it remarks that Hiruzen is highly skilled in close quarters combat and taijutsu with his adamante Noi, so a close range fight likely is pretty likely, and I will be frank, if Tobirama can push Hiruzen and force him to engage in this sort of battle, I think it leans in Tobirama's favor. As the longer the fight progresses, the more flying Raijin marks will be placed, and the more Tobirama's exceptional sensory abilities will actually come into the fray, which would help him mitigate whatever advantages the adamante Noi would actually grant. However, if you can't tell from what I've laid out, at least based upon all this is pretty conservative for Hiruzen, as I'm presupposing that the 10-year amplifier isn't there, and that's just the old Hiruzen from the war, and not the Ninetales version prior that we discussed, who, once again, could handle those KCM 2 plus level threats in the full Ninetales and should be much stronger, meaning that Tobirama can only win through using the Flying Raijin to help cover the speed gaps like he did versus Madara. However, it does make the case for Hiruzen, at least while younger, being superior pretty clear, all things considered, and while yes, Tobirama could evade jutsu and possibly catch Hiruzen off guard, killing him, more often than not, Hiruzen should win, seeing as he has the ninjutsu advantage, genjutsu advantage, taijutsu advantage, raw physical advantage, and all Tobirama has is a speed, technique, and a sensory ability, so all in all, I would actually say that Hiruzen should win this fight, probably 7 out of 10 times, helping that consistent narrative of the third generation surpassing the more diplomatic focused second generation, whatnot. Either way, let me know, do you think, maybe Tobirama would just blitz stomp, or Hiruzen should one-shot with all of his jutsu? I don't know. Let me know. The goal here was more so to place Hiruzen, even in his older states like Part 1 and the Ninetales attack, to still be a first 4 Hokage tier. He's not on that back end next to Tsunade or anything like that. He's arguing, he should be argued alongside those first 4. If you enjoyed, then subscribe. It'd be greatly appreciated, and hype this video to let it reach more people, or just check out some more of my content, as I'm sure you'll find a lot you can enjoy. But more importantly, may God bless you all. Love you guys.